Afternoon. Just going to talk really quickly about what's happening in Niger. The U.S. is losing access to their Air Force drone base in Niger. They've got a drone base up in Agadez, which is in the middle of the desert that they built in 2016 for drone operations. This was ostensibly to fight terrorism in the region. Realistically, it was probably more to spy on other people, but we can talk about that later. Reality is to maintain a desperate foothold in an area the U.S. has none. The U.S. has kind of ignored Africa, sort of half-stepped it. Tried to play catch-up by instituting a command down there. We can talk about that in a moment. A junta took over Niger, France, and the U.S. became persona non grata. The Niger teamed up with Russia and China over a decade ago. Implications for the military and the trade future. Uranium sales, well, the USA is now the odd man out. And so is France, by the way, Western countries generally. U.S. military is building a $100 million drone base in Africa. This article is from 2016, just talking about when it was originally constructed. And that's just a view of the drone base. You can see it's a few Quonset huts, a couple of dirt runways. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's a place where you can launch a drone to go spy on other people. And I keep emphasizing that because really that's about all you can do with that. It's not really a major support area. You really can't stage a lot of troops. The most they had there was maybe 1,000. And although Niger, I know, has at least one C-130 airplane, it doesn't land out here. It probably could on an unimproved runway. It definitely could if you had the right equipment, but how much are you going to be able to really run from out in the middle of the desert like that with no support structure? You can't even get clean water out that way. So that would be an expeditionary challenge. Regardless, this is how it started, and this is kind of how it's going. The U.S. military will begin plans to withdraw troops from Niger. This is from April 20th. U.S. begins plans to withdraw troops from Niger, U.S. officials said Saturday. A blow to Washington and its allies in the region. We don't have any allies in the region anymore in terms of staging security operations in the Sahel. Okay, I was there in 2007. They were just getting started with having some kind of presence there. And they did have some concerns back in the 90s. There was an embassy or two that was blown up. But for the most part, the era of military juntas and takeovers were violent revolutions. That's pretty much behind them. Yes, I know they had a junta in Niger, but the junta has had tremendous public support. It makes you wonder about the initial democratically elected leader, how he was put up there. But the idea that the U.S. has to go in there and constantly be fighting terrorism and fighting this and fighting that, any security problems, Niger's been able to get taken care of by using the Russians. Not using the Russians, make a deal with the Russians. Prigozhin went down there with his people, and they got stuff done. And the Russians came down there. They said, you want this? We can give you that. And they do it. The U.S. kind of sort of comes down there and they make a promise. They glad hand. They disappear. Then someone else gets elected and priorities change. And you never really know what to expect from the U.S. And China was involved when I was there in 2007. They were selling them military equipment. They had some brand new trucks. They had some weapons to replace the older Cold War and, frankly, World War II stuff from before. There were brand new AK-47s there. So this is nothing new, and we've been desperately trying to play catch-up. And like I said, Africa Command was one way to sort of do it. They sort of half-step this. They call it a command. It's a NATO map symbol, makes it look like a big unit. It does not have that many troops dedicated to it. The entire U.S. military is smaller than it was back in 2007, the Army anyway. It's smaller than it was back in the mid-90s when I joined. So it's a problem of mission analysis and flat-out recruiting, but that's another subject. U.S. agrees to pull troops from the key drone host in Niger. U.S. agreed to withdraw more than 1,000 troops from Niger. Not sure if that's how many were there or that's how many were authorized. But regardless, the U.S. delegation headed within days to the capital Niamey to arrange an orderly withdrawal. Long the linchpin in U.S. and French strategy to combat jihadists in West Africa. Yeah, the French were not really making friends there either. The situation seemed to get worse the more we intervened. When I got there in 2007, there wasn't a whole lot going on in terms of revolutionary activity, but it seemed like as soon as the U.S. came there, it's almost like it rekindled the means for these people to exist, and or at least the spirit behind it. The attacks increased all around Africa. So what were we really trying to accomplish there? So the junta, like military governments in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso, also sought closer relations with Russia. Well, they got them. And by the way, 4 months later, kicked out the troops from colonial power France. And they're losing access to the bases. Why it's a big deal? Well, we think it's a big deal. And they're going to reduce The French and U.S. governments have reduced aid to Niger. In other words, don't do what we want you to do, and we cut off your money. You don't get a Scooby snack. It's sort of getting them to dance on the end of a string the way we want them to. This sort of reward colonialism has been going on for decades all around Africa. Now you do this and you ban that and you do this and we'll give you that. And they have just enough poverty there and just enough corruption in their leaders to actually go along with this. Well, it must have gotten pretty bad and they got fed up enough and they got a better offer from Russia, from China, from even Iran. In response, Niger's ruling junta has strengthened military cooperation with Russia and Iran. If military cooperation is stronger with Russia and Iran, imagine China. U.S. forces removed from Niger entirely will provide opportunities for China to increase influence there. It's already there, like I mentioned. In recent years, China has been one of Niger's top trading partners. Recent years, it's the world's largest trading partner. In 2022, China took approximately 9% of Niger's exports, uranium principally, and accounted for 22% of Niger's imports. So if that's where we are, China's going to be the economic force, and Russia and potentially Iran as a supplier could be the military in as much as it's needed. I mean, after all, who makes better AK-47s than China, Russia, and Iran can make drones? I mean, what does the U.S. and the French in particular bring to the table? The French can't even muster 2,000 troops to go to Ukraine right now. And America, as I discussed, we've got our own problems trying to fill our military ranks. Can we really back anything up here? Well, it doesn't take a genius to see that no, we can't. So Niger's military junta ditches America and courts Russia. This article is in a paywall. I can't show it to you, but the word is out. And they're not the only ones. Another African state moves to kick out military. Chad has reportedly asked American troops to stop activities at an airbase near the capital of Niger. Sorry for mispronouncing that, but stop activity at the base, Chad said. I mean, that's what's going on. Oh, Chad hasn't asked forces to leave. The U.S. and Chad have agreed that the period following the upcoming Chadian presidential election is an appropriate time to review our security cooperation. State Department, who always lies, they're going to be asked to leave. They are. You can be sure. They're going to see the same deal that Niger got. They're going to want to participate also. Hundreds in Niger tell U.S. to go home. This is in Agadez, that remote city in the middle of the desert, getting out there waving Russian flags, telling people, this is Agadez, not Washington, U.S. Army, go home. Read a big banner held up by protesters. Now, is this being done by Russian or Chinese official PSYOP? Potentially, perhaps, but I can promise you the Americans have been doing enough PSYOP on that continent, and it obviously hasn't been all that effective. We can't back up what we promised to do, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. Back when they were talking about after the junta, that Victoria Nuland was saying that, you need to put the democratically elected president back in charge. ECOWAS threatened to invade. In solidarity with Niger, 3 neighboring countries, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali, decided not to enforce the sanctions imposed by the ECOWAS. So if ECOWAS is supposed to be their organized group, what is ECOWAS? ECOWAS is a group that was put together by the Treaty of Lagos in 1975, and it may not last if the backing is going to be from external sources that are not Russia, China, and Iran, and whoever else. Then you can see where it may lead. What's the advantage of staying there? So Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso announced withdrawal from ECOWAS. The 3 nations, led by military governments, accused the regional bloc of becoming a threat to member states. And they're probably right. So Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso decide a complete sovereignty and the immediate withdrawal from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, read a joint statement. So ECOWAS, under the influence of foreign powers, betraying its founding principles, has become a threat to its member states and population. I would argue ECOWAS has always been under the influence of foreign powers, but that's another story. They say it's illegal, illegitimate, inhumane. Well, who knows? Can't really argue with all of that because it might be at least partially true. So why are we so intent on keeping somebody there, not just to compete with Russia, China? We like the idea, according to Edward Snowden's revealed documents. British and American intelligence agencies' surveillance targets with America's National Security Agency included organizations such as the ECOWAS, who are spying on ECOWAS, of course, we have to keep them in line, and the UNDP, and the children's charity UNICEF. So they were not the only people being spied on. They were spying on China, were spying on whoever else is down there. That was the whole point of that base. ECOWAS, this is how it exists right now. Member states and suspended states. We have just almost as many suspended states as they do have member states. We'll see how long this thing stays together. Again, founded in 1975 from the Treaty of Lagos. Member states, these guys suspended. And the CFA is another question. What happens with the currency being used in some of those countries, including Niger? It's backed largely by European bonds. So There's been discussions about reforming the West African currency, but even in 2019, they said it was way off. On West African Economic Monetary Union, an uptick in the volume and issuers of Eurobonds has increased the dependence on the key feature of the CFA franc, its unlimited convertibility to euros guaranteed by the French Treasury. Well, you just kick the French troops out. You don't think the French are going to try to lean on this. They can't affect the bonds they already own. But will that mean they'll buy Russian or Chinese bonds? Well, those don't really exist internationally, but they could exist at some point. The Chinese right now do not have auctions or repo markets for their bonds. There's no way you can really buy that yet. And it's ditto for the ruble, or at least to my knowledge, if they have them at all, they're not the financial products that are available through Eurobonds or the American treasuries. The point is that they're going to be looking for alternatives. And if they were already looking at that back in 2019, you can be sure they're looking at it more so now. The Carnegie Endowment of Peace, of course, they're not happy because they're backed by big money and big U.S. government. The Niger coups outsized global impact. At least they recognize that. Niger's government was overthrown. Yeah, probably good reason for that, but we don't really know. Again, popularly supported. Niger's economic and social implications indicators place it at the bottom of global development. These metrics understate the country's strategic importance to the vast country. It's at a position of Northwest and Central Africa. Mineral and oil resources, not as heavy on oil. They do have some, but it's mostly uranium, and we know what uranium is used for. Nuclear power and potentially weapons, although I think nuclear weapons are wildly overstated in terms of their significance. Iran just showed they're able to get a lot done without using nukes against one of their principal pains in the ass in the Middle East. So they're recognizing this is a problem. This is not new. The Chinese have been down there for a while. This is one of the best covers on a relevant book on the subject. You can see the Chinese guy working with the Africans. China's now taken Great Britain's place as Africa's third largest business partner. This is in 2009. They recognize this. Where others see only chaos, the Chinese see opportunities. With no colonial past and no political reconditions, China's bringing investment and needed infrastructure to a continent that's been largely ignored by Western companies or nations. It is so true. China says they're going to do something. Here's the deal. Are you in or out? You're in. Great. Let's do it. You don't have it change in 4 years with a new election. They're getting it done. So economically, China's going to be down there. Militarily, Russia can help. Like I said, Iran and whoever else may participate. A good article on the subject actually ironically comes from Teen Vogue. I'm going to drop this in the comments, but this is an SF guy training troops down there, either in Mali or Niger or someplace down there. What is AFRICOM? How the U.S. military is militarizing and destabilizing Africa. Like I mentioned, as soon as they got involved, the terrorist attacks went up. It didn't get more peaceful. It didn't get more stable. So I will drop this in the comments. You guys can leave a comment or a question. Read this for yourself. It's not the same game anymore. We don't have the influence we think we have. And Africa is not wrong to start looking for opportunities elsewhere. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.